You have that very clear delineation between, the acts of what is supposed to happen. You generally ramp up the tension or whatever towards some kind of a conclusion, and here it was more like things happening, things happening, things happening. Oops, we are already killing Dracula, and now the movie ends. So I don't know, maybe it's a product of its time, but there was a lot of, it's metaphorically dripping bodily fluids, apart from blood. So there was a lot of sexual and semi-sexual tension in there, and I thought that they would wrap it up a bit more than they did. And it for a movie that is, if not directly but metaphorically about sex and a climax, it's a very anticlimactic climax. It's, I don't know. I don't know how to put it in better terms.
Well, if you looked at it in terms of a novel, the climax is the whole chase, and that's exciting.
Yeah, and that's sort of like, okay, we now end up at like whatever Abbey, and we're chasing Dracula's servant, but there wasn't like a 1 minute scene when they are noticing that that guy is gone and that they have to chase him. It's just cut from wherever we were before, the sanatorium, to Dracula's Abbey. So I was kind of missing that connecting link.
Well, this is, remember, there were two versions of Dracula. There was Dracula novel and Dracula the stage play. And the stage play could not follow the structure of a novel.
Fair point.
There was no way for it to be done. So they were creating a film that was designed for people who wanted to see the play.
I see.
And the ending is, I had problems with the ending myself because I really love the novel. So as I said, it took me a while to get to appreciate this film on its own terms. The other thing is that this is a movie. This is an A movie. The type of film you're talking about is a B movie.
Yeah, fair point.
And B movies are structured with that type of structure, but A movies are completely different. They tell a story. This is telling a story. The story is the arrival of Dracula in England and what he does in England.
I haven't read the novel in like 10 years at least, but I remember the novel being structured relatively differently, that he gets to London very late.
He gets to London.
Like at the very
first
end
half of the movie has Jonathan Harker coming to the first half of the novel. Jonathan Harker goes to Transylvania.
Yeah.
Second part of the novel is in 3 sections. The second section of the novel, Dracula goes to England, and the third section is Dracula returning to Transylvania.
With them chasing.
Chasing
okay,
him.
Now I start to remember.
Yeah.
The other thing that, especially because there isn't any score, like I suppose you removed all the score from it.
There was no score on it.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Because without the score, this felt very much. Okay, this is me, a complete idiot when it comes to films, talking to you, who is my complete opposite here, but whatever. It felt very much like either a silent movie or well, silent movies are more or less stage plays. You had a lot of places where people are talking, for example, you have a bit of a pause. It felt a bit like people were waiting for their cue to talk. It didn't have that. Well, it's not really a naturalistic flow that you have nowadays, but it's a very, the language of modern movies is very different when it comes to dialogue. It's a much more of a flow, and here it's a bit of a stop-start. It's a bit of a stutter effect, which is, for me, only broken when Dracula, who is, very seductive, very sexual, very much unlike this sort of distance, sort of parceled out world, talks, or when the women he seduces talk, who talk in a much more fluid, much more dynamic way. I don't know if that was just something that I projected onto the screen from my own thoughts, or if that was actually in there. And the other thing, I already talked to you about, how much I like the cinematography. There was one place where Dracula's servant is walking into the room where Van Helsing and whoever else is talking, and his shadow is reflected onto the door. And the door has these, what do you call them? Decorations on it, so it's not an even surface. And because he's sort of stooped, and he walks a bit with a uneven gait and an unnatural gait, and because the door is also an uneven surface, you get this very, very unnatural progression of how his shadow is reflected onto that door, which I don't know if that was intentional, but that was a masterful shot for me. Is that was this really, really inhuman thing just creeping into the scene.
Well, that's probably that was designed because, again, Lang was a premier cinematographer.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed about this is how the reflection of the lampshades in the room with Lucy, when Lucy and Mina are talking and Dracula's outside, when you see the lamp behind her, it creates the shadow of a bat.
Yeah, it forms like, yeah.
The other lampshades don't do that, but that particular one does.
That was very nice. These little details that you can pick up. I wasn't particularly impressed by the bat, but I don't think anybody is. I don't know if that's a new thing in cinema, that you have people who train animals to be on film. Like,
well,
I know
that's a bat on wires. That's not
a
trained bat. But
yeah, but I know that you had horses and lions and whatever in film since its beginning, but that you have these specialized animal trainers who pick out these individual things. That took me out of it a bit. So did I think stuffed rats, or the rats in the beginning in Dracula's castle.
Well, they're armadillos.
Yeah, and the armadillos as well. It's like, what the hell is that? How do armadillos?
Well, you're from Transylvania. Yeah, they don't belong there.
Well, Transylvania used to be a part of Hungary, but yeah. And the other interesting thing is, this is part of the novel, that the Dracula mythology is based on, Vlad Dracul, is not a Hungarian guy, and he didn't rule over the Hungarian part of Transylvania. That's almost completely Romanian/Slavic myth. It's very, very unrelated to mainline Hungarian mythology. But then, that was mostly what the English literature did in the 19th century, is we are going to this dark and uncultured continent, which is, just 40 kilometers of water away from us, but it's not, is this decaying, decadent, medieval thing, and we are taking something from them and showing them the light of enlightenment and all that imperialistic bullshit. Sorry. What else to say about it? It was a very nice experience, both seeing this, and I think it's a good bookends to my stay here in Toronto, to see Dracula for the first time with you in your home, and then discussing it and then being videotaped to top it all off. I don't know if you would like to ask me questions, ma'am.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I appreciate the film more and more each time I see it. You start off by looking at it in terms of what I started off looking at it in terms of the movie I imagined when I read the book.
Yeah.
And that movie was not the movie that I saw.
No.
So that got in the way of my appreciating the film. I did from the beginning, and still do, like the way Lugosi plays the part. And as I watched the film more and more and began to observe its effect, not only on myself but on other people, because I've seen the film with literally thousands of people, and I usually watch these films when I show them. Not all the time, but usually. And I've noticed how films impact on an audience. The thing is, if you want to study film, you have to study film with an audience, with a paying audience. You can't study film in a classroom. The classroom situation puts the person observing the film above the film. And we have to be immersed in the film. We have to be below the film, looking up at it, not in a situation where we feel superior to it.
Oh yeah, I understand what you're saying there.
The first film to use music was King Kong, which is 1932.
Yeah.
RKO produced King Kong. David Selznick produced King Kong. He asked the people at RKO if they wanted to do a soundtrack on the film. They said music track. They said no. Selznick put his own money into it. He had the film scored, and the energy of that score is just phenomenal. That led to scoring films again. Silent films weren't shown silent. They were
Yeah.
seen in theaters with orchestras of anywhere from 4, 5, 6 pieces to 180 pieces in the big theaters with solo voice and chorus and sound effects crew. So the experience of seeing a silent film was completely unlike anything that we can even begin to imagine. And they weren't particularly trained musicians. They were young people who worked cheap. It's always, the industry
Yeah.
always looks at the dollar first and everything else second with that, which again comes down to why they didn't properly exploit Lugosi.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had something that was really hot and they let it go. He wasn't taken
Yeah.
care of. Karloff wasn't taken care of either. That time the industry was a real piece of work. Karloff and Lugosi were both very strongly instrumental in creating the Actors Guild
Mm-hmm. I see.
union.
Yeah.
They were, just right out front.
Yeah. They were fed up with, yeah.
Well, everybody was, but they actually they were doing something about it.
And they had the clout, yeah.
Well, they had suffered long in the trenches themselves.
I
On
see.
Frankenstein, James Whale made Karloff piss in a bucket on set, so they wouldn't be wasting any time.
That's, yeah.
It's just the way they were treated was just completely awful, and they did something about that.
Mm-hmm.
Lugosi went bankrupt in '32, not because he was throwing away his money, but because he was taking care of his friends.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one with the money, so he was looking after the Hungarian community in Hollywood. People don't know these things. They figure, oh, he went bankrupt. He must have wasted his money. No, he didn't waste it. He took care of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with his addiction to drugs. He was wounded in combat in World War One, and at that time they treated people on battle lines with morphine.
Yeah.
So that addicted them for life.
The other thing, just going back to the movie, that I very much liked, and I think it's a deliberate thing, it's a deliberate subtext, not something I'm reading into, because you can read anything into anything if you try hard enough, which is one of my problems with modern film analysis and the whole deconstruct. So the very subjectivist film interpretations that I can, if you try hard enough, you can read friendship, love, and happiness into Mein Kampf, probably. So there was that scene when Mina was trying to seduce her husband or betrothed,
Boyfriend, Harker.
yeah, boyfriend at the time, and she's basically fucking him, and then she recoils from a cross, and then she can't look on the cross after having done what she has just done. It's a very Christian or Christian morality centric scene, and I very much enjoyed that. For the time at least, in your face, scene about the Christian morality and sexuality and things like that. Sorry, I'm a bit tired, so I can't voice my thoughts all that well. So yeah, that I very much enjoyed that kind of subtext in the movie, and it's obviously there in the book as well, although not that strongly. So it's good to see, because this is really my first time viewing it, and it's good to see where the vampire as this proxy for sexuality thing really crept into modern public consciousness. Because by now, I have a very low opinion on Twilight movies, but they also are steeped in sexuality, or very much in the lack of sexuality.
Before you wrap up here, what's your name and where are you from?
I'm Daniel, and I'm from Hungary, currently from the UK.
How'd you get to Toronto?
There was a conference, I attended it, I had some days off, I saw your flyers, looked you up on the internet, and it turned out that this is a fun place to be, and it is.
And who told you I'm crazy?
The internet,
Yeah.
and then you.
Yeah. Well, if you're not crazy, you're not worth knowing.
Exactly.
I've had people who come here from out of town, and they said, we asked around town to find out who was the most spoken against person in the city, and you are. So we came here because we knew it was going to be good.
Yeah, that's a badge.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, because people have no idea of the favor they're doing you.
All right.
Everything I've used in this city has said something about it that keeps all the people you don't want coming out from coming.
Cool.
Is I've had this real knack for just doing it just the right way, which of course to them is the wrong way. It's a pleasure to share this with you. I'm glad you saw Dracula for the first time here.
Oh yeah, me too.
Cheers.
Cheers.